Hello and welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast.
At what age do we learn how to have better conversations? At what age do we learn to have better conversations with ourselves?
Knowledge is power.
Reality is...
Cool. So I wanted to start it out. Welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast. I'm really pumped to talk to both of you today. I wanted to kind of read just a little glimpse of your bio here that was sent over to me, and then maybe you two can elaborate on it and introduce yourselves and tell everybody what you do so well. So Erwan and Alicia Davon use their backgrounds in Zen Buddhism, psychology, and women's sexuality studies to develop the Pleasure Course, which has helped thousands achieve their ideal love lives. They provide a safe place to explore psychological inquiry, pleasure, and sexuality. Recently, their work has focused on pandemic-related intimacy issues with singles, dating intimacy during the pandemic, and couples physically close but losing connection. I think it's wonderful what you guys do. I think it's a great time for that sort of thing right now. So welcome to the podcast. Hello.
Hi, great to be here.
Yeah. So what...
I love I love that we do that.
I
I appreciate you reading it, Jake. I love that.
The reflection is nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So, give me kind of how'd you get into this? I mean, Erwan, I think it was 1995 you started doing this, and then Alicia joined later.
About your background first.
Okay, 1995, I had a very far out love life. I had a very far out girlfriend, I had a very far out love life, was going to the University of California, Santa Cruz, which is a place that's just kind of open for possibility, especially in 1995. And I was studying psychology, and that was after needing an enormous amount of psychological help as a teenager. I was in psychoanalysis multiple days a week. I had an obsessive compulsive disorder. My family had basically been destroyed. My mother left when I was 7. My father was a street fighter. My mother died when I was 15. I'd barely seen her since I was 7. And it just goes on and on and on and on. That's the good part. Okay. So I did a ton of psychological work, started in New York, came out to California, and took every possible workshop I could, anything and everything. I'm running around the room, waving my arms. I'm doing primal therapy. I'm studying psychology. I'm in, all the rest of this kind of stuff. And in the middle of all that, I realized what I was the most passionate about, the most interested in, especially after I kind of sorted myself out psychologically, was women. I was really interested in women. Now this is, saying that now feels like, well, so is everybody. But for me, it was like a big, aha, wow, okay, I know what I'm interested in, right? After I sort of sorted myself out. Having taught all those workshops, I was teaching for one of the world's largest organizations. Then I just branched out, started teaching about romance and relationship. It was more about kind of sex and a wild lifestyle early on, because that's what I was living. Long story short, later on, Alicia came into the picture. Trained me or husbanded me, or what do you say? Turned me into a husband, or how do you say? What's a word for that?
Yes. I don't like the word tame, because you are my wild man.
Yeah, but something domesticated. That's
there you go. That word.
Domestication.
So one of the biggest things we support people in now is, if they're single getting into relationships, or if they're in a couple, how do you have a domestic situation, much less in a pandemic, that's still rocking, that's still hot, that's still turned on.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into it. How about you?
Yes. Yeah. So I had like the opposite upbringing as
Okay.
Erwan. I grew up in LA, had a really stable family, a little brother, 2 parents. They're all great. My parents still live in the same house that I grew up in. It was nice. It was kind of a bubble, it was sheltered. And of course, I had issues like everybody had issues. But as I went through college, I started to feel like, is this all there is? That question. Like, I'm pretty comfortable. Things are okay. And there was this sneaking in of like depression and emptiness. And what is this? And that drove me into therapy, and like Erwan was describing, these workshops. I'd go to these incredible like women's workshops, and we were in sweat lodges and drumming and all this kind of stuff. And I had these really powerful awakenings, like, oh my gosh, there is way more to life than I thought. So it starts me on the path of psychology. I went to grad school, got a master's in psychology. And then I remember the moment where I realized I was totally obsessed with not just psychology, but sexuality, female sexuality, and how that jives with our psychology. And I was like holed up in the library reading these old texts at my grad school, trying to like get information really about myself, right? And my body and opening and everything. And I couldn't quite like scratch the itch that way, reading books, even though books are great. And one day my friend Shayna in my program was like, Alicia, I just met this guy, Erwan. You have to meet him. He teaches these classes in San Francisco all about pleasure and orgasm and being present in relationship. I'm like, I got to get to this guy like right away. So she brings me over to Erwan's, and he was leading this group. There were like 20 people in the room sitting around in a circle doing these communication games. And I remember walking, like literally crossing the threshold of his front door and feeling like I just came on to ecstasy or something. I'm like, this is amazing. And people were like looking into each other's eyes as they were talking and talking about real stuff, So I got interested. I was very interested in Erwan. I was in another relationship at the time that was like going downhill, and this made it go downhill way faster.
Yeah.
We broke up, and then, we have a long, funny story of how we got back into touch, but we came back together, we started dating, and like Erwan was just rocking my world in all ways. And so I never left.
Wow. Wonderful. And now you guys do this together, and you've expanded your teachings, and you've progressed over time, and I'm sure just gotten better and made your program more specific. It's so what have you found? I mean, I really like sticking in where you guys have been working on helping people during the pandemic, because I feel like that probably totally threw a curveball to what you guys typically do. I mean, because you did live events before, and so that's suddenly not able to do that. So how did it change when the pandemic hit? How did your guys' work change?
Well, it was actually a change that we were slowly making anyways, bringing our classes online. And this just kind of pushed us to do it really quickly. So luckily we had been doing some teaching online and some coaching in some of our classes. So we just moved everything online really quickly. And it was amazing because not only our current students, but lots of people were looking for connection and kind of like, what am I going to do? I can't go to bars and parties and this and that. So, our Mastery of Relationship class that was primarily in person expanded like to 3 times the size online within a couple of months. And it was like, not that I wanted the pandemic to happen at all, but it was actually, there were some positive things that came out of it in terms of our teaching and being able to reach people all over the world.
Basically we embraced change. And when it happened, we just said, yes, okay, what's required here. There was always a lot of innovation and change in what we do by the very nature of it. And the organization actually kind of had that theme as well. So when the pandemic came, we were like, okay, online, great, boom, boom, boom. In 3 weeks, we were completely set up. We were just, like that. And we found it was really surprising because you can touch people and be touched by people and reach people through Zoom online in ways that I wouldn't have thought. it's because the spirit or the being, is sort of in the body in a particular way, but it's also not really limited to that. So if people are really present, like we just met you, Jacob, but like I feel you, you feel us, there's a lot of affinity, there's a closeness, we're in each other's space, we're in each other's experience. Like we're actually very close in a particular way if we're willing to acknowledge it. Since we're being open, you're being very open, we're a little open. So, we just kind of embraced change in a situation. And from Alicia's history of having great parents, I have great in-laws, she's got a kind of natural ability to do that. For me, all the difficulties I've had to undergo, I also have an ability to embrace change, and romantic relationship really requires that. And the pandemic really requires that.
Right. Yeah. So I even noticed just in this podcast, because I started out doing in person. I had a nice little studio set up, and then once COVID came around, had to switch to Zoom, and it took me a little bit, but I started kind of realizing what you just said is you really can get a good connection on here. As it turns out, you can really kind of just lock into the conversation with one another. It is a little bit different than in person, but I was pretty happy with how quickly I was able to adjust, and the guests are able to adjust, and we can be here with one another. So what are you guys seeing coming up since the pandemic? What are the people in your audiences, the people you guys are working with? What's coming up a lot? Like, what are some common issues? Some things that some listeners may be able to go, oh, that's happening with me. I would love to hear that explained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is that, like any big, crisis or big event, it exacerbates things that are already there. So, for example, a lot of people, we work with both singles and couples. And of course, as singles, especially with the pandemic, but even beforehand, online dating is a huge thing. It's like a big way to meet people. Prior to the pandemic, we would always support people in do some online dating, have fun with the apps. Here's how to do this effectively, but go to house parties, meet people, mingle, right? Because in person is great. That wasn't possible once the pandemic hit. So people that are single have felt isolated and felt like, oh my gosh, I really want to meet my person, my soulmate. There's some people that were kind of the age of wanting to have kids and feeling like, oh no, this is getting delayed. So we've been working with our singles on how to successfully online date and how to safely move the relationship forward, from initially hooking up with someone on an app and then getting on Zoom and meeting each other and then being in person eventually. That's okay if you do it safely. A lot of people have been scared to do that, obviously, because of COVID. So, and we've also discovered lots of speed dating events online. That's actually the thing that works the best, is these speed dating events online versus the apps. So we've discovered a bunch of those and helped our students navigate those.
And that's a good tip for your audience, Jacob. Speed dating, speed dating online is pretty optimal because it's so convenient. If I were single, I would do 2 or 3 speed dating events per week, literally.
Oh, wow.
They're like $30, spend $30 to $90 per week, meet 5 to 10 people every time. You get a lot of social interaction, which takes away from the loneliness and the isolation. You potentially meet somebody. We also, as Alicia said, support people in taking it offline. But speed dating online is really convenient. It's pretty optimal, and it's generally a lot better than the apps. The apps, they can be good for hooking up. They can be good for getting into a relationship, but they're way more difficult than people think.
Right. So how does the online speed dating work? It's just it's just kind of like this, and then it shifts through. You meet different people based off of interest, or because I had been in a relationship for 10 years, and we split ways healthily. We're still friends. 6-7 months ago, and I just totally haven't done any of the dating apps. I haven't done any of the any speed dating. So I don't know. I just don't know a ton about it, I guess. So
Yeah. So the way that it works is that there's somebody facilitating it, and then they're just rotating people into different breakout rooms with each other for limited amounts of time. So you can connect with someone briefly, and then you can show interest in the people that you are interested in later. And they have a system for that. And then they match you.
And they're usually have a theme, right? Like some speed dating is about, whatever, being Jewish or being Christian or being New Age or being interested in, I don't know, films or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the other way they sort of segment it is by age group. Mm-hmm. So you kind of, you go to one that has an age group you like, maybe one that has a theme you like, and then you meet people who are in that, and you get a lot more information about them because you're really interacting.
Right. Right. Cool. Oh, that's awesome. I hope just that little description encourages people to go give it a try. I've been trying to flirt with the idea in my head more and try to, think about expanding and moving on to the next stage of life and, allowing myself to meet people. So I'm working on that myself, of course. So I was kind of curious, could you guys explain how does a lens of psychology really fit in with being in tune with our sexual selves? Like how does someone who doesn't study psychology or know much about it, they might be like, well, how does psychology and learning about your mind and your emotions and these sort of things, what does that have to do with sex?
Yeah. So we have a term for psychology. We call it a person's relationship blueprint. And that relationship blueprint is something that's forged in the crucible of our childhood. That sounds very profound.
I know.
But it's true.
It that way.
We all know it's true, right? Like how our parents related with us and how we related with them and how they related with each other is basically how we learn to relate. And most people's relationship lives, whether it's colleagues or friends or romantic relationships, are inside of that box. So it's probably the most difficult and the most important part of our work. There's really sexy parts, extended orgasm and flirting and dating. And we've been talking a little bit about that. That's really fun and great. We love supporting people in that stuff. But where the biggest difference is made is usually in a person seeing and understanding their box, their relationship blueprint. So they're not limited by that box and not reproducing the same relationship or lack of relationship over and over again.
Mm. Yeah. I noticed. I was watching a couple of the videos. I was trying to just pull it up here. Alicia, you had talked about one that kind of stood out. You were working with someone who, I think it was basically around when it came time to get sensual. Around these moments, she would kind of bring up some drama. She would kind of create her own friction, or and it would cause an argument around these things. I thought that was super interesting, because I think that of course seems kind of unconscious, right? Who would want to do that? Who would knowingly try to bring arguments when they would like to release that tension in another way? Could you elaborate a little bit on that, Alicia?
Yes, yeah, I know the example that you're talking about, and with this couple that I work with. And there's something like on one level, she was like, yeah, I want more sexual activity in the relationship. I want to be more turned on. They've been together for years. And she didn't quite have her hands around why they weren't. And so as we inquired into it, we realized, she actually starts to feel like a little scared and like uncomfortable and unsure of herself and insecure when she gets closer to intimacy and sexuality. And she was like not aware of that. And she would unconsciously act out, pick a little fight or find some reason to avoid and then later complain. And it's these funny things we do as human beings where we say we want one thing, and then that might actually be our heart's desire. But then if we're not aware of what's unconsciously driving us, it can actually sabotage what we want.
Yeah. Well, so how do we bring awareness? So if anybody's saying, "Oh, that kind of sounds like me. I think we do that. I want to work on that." How do we that first step I think is always awareness, right? You
That's right.
get a look at it. How do
Awareness
we
is
bring
the
awareness?
most important part. No, I'm
Right.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Elaborate.
you're right. Awareness is the most important part. There's 4 practices that we have our students do, ideally daily. I don't know if they all do them daily, but we recommend they do them daily. The first one is meditate. That's really just cultivating awareness. It's like having a garden of awareness in your space that you're cultivating. We think that's the most important. That's what I picked up at the Zen monastery and the yoga ashram. Second one is psychological inquiry. What's going on with me right now? Ooh, I'm kind of turned on, but I'm sort of in the opposite side of the house from Alicia, and like I'm kind of avoiding her or something like that. Like, oh, okay, what is that about? Ooh, I'm kind of scared, to sort out what's going on in the moment for us. Bring the unconscious conscious. So that's psychology or person's relationship blueprint. We recommend some psychological inquiry every day. Doesn't need to be a big therapy session. It can be 2 minutes of journal writing or just sitting down in an easy chair saying, hey, what's going on with me right now? Like that. Third thing is body practice, especially in the pandemic, particularly important. People are really in their heads as human beings. Our brain is most developed of all of our organs and systems compared to other animals. So people just end up in their heads. And when we're spending a lot of time without social interaction in our houses, on Zoom, etc., really easy to do that, right? So body practice could be anything. Right now, I've got this mat under my feet. You can't see it, but like I'm rolling around this sort of ball with my feet and that kind of thing. And I've got a yoga block there and there's some texture and we've got sort of yoga props kind of all around our house. So we're sort of like always doing yoga. It could be body practice could be walking around barefoot. It could be lifting weights. It could be taking a shower. It could be anything, but just that there's a consistent practice to stay in one's body. And then the fourth one is sensual practice, which can be anything of the senses, from music to incense, all the way to sexual practice, practiced alone or with a partner. We have a whole set of practices. So daily practice is what makes a difference. That's another thing I picked up in the Zen monastery. People kind of think that intellectually knowing something is really living it or knowing it, but that's not true. Mm-hmm. So the most famous Zen master said, practice is enlightenment. That just totally blew me away. So those are the ones that we've found make the biggest difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about, I forget who says it, but before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Yeah, and I love mentioning that practice, I think that is something very important, especially with us, we're more on our computers. A lot of us have switched our jobs to Zoom and these sort of things. I think, the act of movement, you're saying you're moving your feet around, I have one of those massage guns. I like to use that every morning, and I think that probably does help. Is that kind of related? Would you say, as we feel more present, confident, and connected to our bodies, that helps us be more open and willing to meet that within our partner? Would you say?
Definitely. We often say that you could put any 2 people together that are, whoever they're attracted to, a man with a woman, or it could be woman, man. And if you're open in your body and your heart and your mind, like, you will be turned on towards each other and you will get along. The mind closure and all those patterns is what gets in the way. Couples will often come to us like, we have decreased chemistry and what do we do? And should we still be together? And we're like, there's nothing wrong with your bodies. Your bodies work perfectly. So moving through those patterns and opening the body and being in the body can lead to a lot of connection and chemistry.
Right. Did you guys, you mentioned awakenings for you. Did you have awakenings of, I asked this because did you have awakenings of kind of realizing that you were disconnected from your body before at all? I feel like when I first kind of discovered meditation, yoga a few years ago, I'd always been athletic and worked out, but I had no idea. I didn't realize I was kind of like disconnected from my body. A lot of my my workouts were more ego lifting, you know, looking in the mirror. And it's so hard to put my finger on and try to describe with words, but I felt when I discovered yoga, started doing meditation, I really started understanding being in your body, being connected, you know, feeling your shirt touch your skin instead of being lost in the mind, and feeling, you know, temperature throughout your body and in different pressure points. And I think the first opening of discovering the awareness of kind of keeping your mind, we're constantly thinking all the time, right? And I believe that a lot of us don't know that we're thinking. We don't notice that we're thinking. A lot of us haven't discovered that awareness. And it's still kind of new to me, just a couple years, but it did help me come back into my body a lot. So is there anything we could touch on right here to speak to people who might feel some sort of disconnect from their body? Maybe they haven't explored too much yoga. They haven't really dove into meditation. They haven't really looked into their thought process and how it affects our physical bodies here. Because I think if we can all connect to our bodies a little bit more, of course, that's going to help in our romantic relationships.
Yeah. I mean, everything you said is absolutely right. People are disconnected from their bodies, and people are disconnected from their experience in a thought zone. The Matrix is a perfect metaphor for that. You know, that movie in some alternate reality. We can imagine stuff, and people mostly are living in kind of an imaginary universe given by their relationship blueprint and their thought process and their work and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Almost all spiritual traditions use the body as a portal, as a gateway to presence. Because the body is actually happening. I could imagine pink elephants, but there are actually no pink elephants here, you know. Right. But my body is here. Your body is there. You know, or Alicia's body is here. You know, that's something that's actually happening. So concentration in the body serves as a ballast or an anchor to the present and to presence. And then from there, we can get into more subtle dimensions of being, or being a human being, you know, emotions and feelings and things that are actually real. They're as there as the body. You know, love, for example, right? Love really is there. I mean, if we really feel into reality deeply, love, everything is love. Everything is made of love. It's very interesting, right? Mm-hmm. From my childhood, I never would have expected that. It was a big awakening. It was like, oh, wow, you know. Now, in the background, we all kind of know that, but we do so much imagining, usually of negative stuff and, you know, all kinds of stuff because of what we see on TV and lifestyle and our histories and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But focus in the body trains one to concentrate and not be distracted by the mind. And concentration is in short order these days, nowadays more than ever, because of the speed of technology. Mm-hmm. So body practice is more required and now than really it's ever been. And it's a portal to awakening, to being, to love, and within oneself. And in a partnership, you know, romantic love and chemistry and turn on and union and intimacy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I like that. That's a great explanation there. As you were talking about us being kind of more disconnected from our bodies, I was thinking about technology and how it's changed. There's a lot of wonderful benefits, right? You know, we have online dating, we have the dating apps. I mean, we could have this conversation. That's so great. But what do you guys have any opinions or recommendations or experience with people around online porn? Is that something that we can do healthily? Is that something that maybe is better off, you know, for relationships to stay away from? Do you have any recommendations there?
It's the overuse that is the problem. It's not porn that's the problem, right? I mean, a little porn is fine if you enjoy that. And of course, there's some that's, you know, more tasteful or not, you know, whatever, more well done or more whatever than others. But everybody has their own preferences and things they like to explore. So it's really not the porn, right? It's the overuse, the misuse, and like replacing real intimacy with that more erotic staring at a screen.
And that's difficult, because, human beings are not wired up to have, potential sexual visuals in our pocket on our phone any time of day.
Right.
For guys in particular, that's hard. Like I remember when I was, I don't know how old I was, 14 or something like that. And like, it was like, and I first saw my first magazine that had naked women in it and that kind of stuff. Like it was weeks of like walking by the newsstand and like, being too nervous to do anything. And then like finally buying it and like the guy wrapping it in a newspaper, like, and then I hid it in my Monopoly set, you know what I'm saying? So it was like a big deal and a whole process. And and it was a few relatively tasteful pictures. It was like Playboy or something, right? You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily realistic pictures, but, because nobody really looks like that exactly. But you know what I mean? It was now it's very hard on males in particular, but both sexes, that there's this massive funnel of any kind of sex you want to see, like available right in your pocket. And most of it is very low quality, very goal oriented. So it's, it's a little bit like being an alcoholic and living in a bar.
Right. Yeah. I think that it's interesting thinking about how for you, when you first dove into porn, like how different it would be for, young people now, where again, it's all right, well, I'm going to check this thing out. And then you just click a couple times and you have thousands and millions of just the most insane, I think I imagine as a young person, diving into the world of online pornography, it'd be just mind blowing to see all of these things before you really know any like knowledge or real, how it may be in real life and in what you can expect going forward. I think we probably we bring in different expectations into our relationships without the knowledge of things being different than they appear on the screen. So how do we? Let's see. How do we bring in? Oh, sorry. Here's where I want to go. Diet. I did want to mention. Apologize. I'm a little all over the place today. Changing diet. You did mention that diet was something important when it comes to intimacy. Is this something that could help, relationships who have been together for a while? Maybe they're kind of like losing some of their spark because they're eating bad food during times that they could be kind of keeping a little bit lighter. Is that where diet comes in?
Well, diet's really important, and everything that you're saying sort of there's a word that comes to mind with all the sort of different areas that you brought up, Jacob, and that's lifestyle. Yeah. Right? Like how we're living. I would say the biggest challenge people have to great romantic relationships is their relationship blueprint, their sort of internal pattern. But then there is the external pattern, how much they're working, what they're eating, pornography, technology. So the way we work with people with those issues or those sort of external environmental issues, is setting up a life that actually works for the person and for their romantic life and relationship life. Because most people's lives are not really actually set up to have a great relationship. If you're a couple and we have a boy, a beautiful boy, but we work with each other and like we work in our house and all the rest of this kind of stuff. So we have as much time together as we want. If you're two people working 2 50-hour-a-week jobs and you have a child, much less in a pandemic, like where is the time for the relationship, right? And then if there's like, eating things that are kind of draining, that kind of thing, like, okay, then there's less vitality. If there's, a lot of watching porn, then that's usually kind of hidden and secret and private. And that brings division and a lack of turn on, especially because for men in particular, who most porn is watched by men, it's very goal oriented or ejaculation focused. So if a guy's watching a lot of porn and ejaculating a lot, he's going to be really drained. There's not going to be much response left for real women in his life, or if he's in a relationship, a real woman in his life. So all of these are really big issues. And that's the second category of challenges that we work with people on, the environment and the external. Diet's important. And if I were to, that's not our like super duper specialty, but eating healthy is really important.
Yeah, there's a couple that I'm working with, and they're a young couple. They have 2 little kids. They both work these crazy tech jobs, and they're just like, And one of the things they said in one of the first couple sessions I had with them, they're like, we're couch potatoes, after the whole day and the work and the kids, and then they're in bed, and like, we just want to on the couch and eat potato chips and watch Netflix. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, but there wasn't time set aside for their relationship. It's one thing, and it's a beautiful thing to have goals in your relationship life, a vision, like, let's connect more, let's have more sex, let's be more intimate. But it's so important to actually get that into your schedule and your calendar. We're huge fans of actually scheduling, for people that are in relationship. We call it pleasure time. It is literally in our calendar. Every morning at 9:15 is our pleasure time. We have sex and practice extended orgasm and talk and hang out. And then we have other times, a few times a week, to do this relationship inquiry together. You have to put it in there. It's not just going to happen.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. I really like that. Planning it, putting it on the calendar. What is there any other bits of pieces of advice that you can offer people in relationships during the pandemic? I have plenty of friends who I'm sure could use some advice around these realms. Who suddenly all the fun, because I think of all the date nights that we're no longer able to do, or maybe date nights are just different. They're kind of at home. Things are starting to slowly open back up. There's some outdoor seating and stuff at certain bars and whatnot. But so what are some other helpful tips and tricks for people in relationships to kind of keep the spark going amidst the pandemic here?
All right, I'll say 2 or 3 things if you want to add any.
Sure.
To ride on the coattails of what Alicia was saying, take an hour a day and have it be pleasure time. It doesn't necessarily need to be sexual, but if you're in a relationship, have an hour a day that you're spending with each other doing something fun. And if that time can't be found, then declare a breakdown. If we can't find an hour a day for the relationship, it's a really good idea to say, hey, wow, there's a problem. There's something that's not working. And that's often difficult for people to just simply acknowledge neutrally without making it bad, but just telling the truth. Like, okay, we can't find an hour a day. That's a problem thing, like that. So find an hour a day for having fun, for maybe romantic connection, maybe going for a walk, that kind of thing. Second thing is, even in the pandemic, because we have a child, right? So, all of a sudden, we couldn't take him to playgrounds, so it was a really big change. So I bought a tourist book for San Francisco, and it turned out to be a gold mine. It was amazing. It's like I discovered San Francisco. So even though we're in a pandemic, there's tons of places to go, and we started going out more. And we can't do the usual things, but it's kind of like where we started our conversation, Jacob. If we embrace change, there's usually all kinds of opportunities. So it turned into, San Francisco has 6 beaches and, all kinds of natural things that I didn't know about. And now we're going to all those kind of places and picnics and all kinds of stuff. So it does take adapting. So the first thing is set up some time for the relationship. The second thing is be willing to adapt and find the things that you can do. And you might be really surprised because, there might actually be even better things to do than before. For example, I watch more Netflix now than I used to, but one thing I found is that I really like documentaries. There's like a gazillion great documentaries. So instead of watching all this stuff that's crushing my spirit, I'm watching things that I'm learning and it's interesting, and I'm reading more and reading. I like biographies, and so it's kind of like that.
Yes. And related to what you were just saying, Erwan, to wake up to the fact that wow, we're in a relationship and we're having trouble making time for each other every day. It's unless it was an arranged marriage or an arranged relationship, which does happen, but not a lot, in this country, you got together with the person because you have the hots for them, it was hot, it was sexy at some point. And that's why you're with the person. That's the main reason. It's not, there's other good things we do with our partners. We have families, some of us, or we get into a house and we live together, we build a life together. But to ignore or deprioritize that main reason you're together is it's never urgent unless it gets urgent, you just want to nurture it.
So too practical to make everything we said a little bit, practical. I love what Alicia just said, if a couple said, okay, we're going to use this pandemic as an opportunity to learn extended orgasm, right? And then they took that sort of condensed space that they're in, and then they use that and focus that, in the long run, the pandemic would have been a blessing, right? Or for a couple or people who are single, if they use, okay, we're in all this sort of private space together, we're going to use it as a spiritual retreat or a meditation retreat, right? In the long run, it would be a blessing. So, anything to, I've heard lectures by people who are in solitary confinement and used it as an opportunity to meditate. The most obvious example, it's not exactly solitary confinement, but is Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela came out of 20 years of prison, tortured most of those days, a better human being than he went in.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, I love that. It really is all about your framing, your mindset that you're bringing into it. I think a lot of us could benefit from kind of shifting all right, how can we turn this into a positive? How can we add some spice into our love life and not kind of take this beating from the lockdown, so to say. I do want to explore a bit more on the extended orgasm. So that was new information to me. I honestly can't say that I had ever heard about that. I thought it was the typical 6 to 12 second situation. I didn't realize there was an opportunity for this extended sensual experience in our human sexuality. So can we explore the difference? I'm sure you guys have already explained this a few times in other videos, which people can check out on your YouTube. Could you explore the difference or explain the difference between extended orgasm and regular?
Yes. So what most people know as orgasm is like a climax orgasm, right? We call it traditional peak orgasm. You're going along, let's say you're with someone, you're making out, you're getting more turned on, then it kind of plateaus a little bit. Then it spikes up and you go over the edge and have that rapid set of contractions and that extreme pleasure. You had an orgasm. That's awesome. Now, extended orgasm is having all of those same signs of orgasm, clinical signs like involuntary contractions in the genitals and, the extreme pleasure in the genitals, which is not really clinical. You can't really measure that, but that pleasure and increased heart rate and all these signs over an extended period of time. Your body has the ability to release into a state of orgasm over time versus having one little boop and it's over.
And how that's possible is by being relaxed. Because usually when people have a very high level of sensitivity, especially in their genitals, they're very tense.
Right.
So they tense, the genitals are gripped and then they just let go and relax, or they get fatigued and the genitals relax and then they crash over the edge very rapidly. But if you get to that high level of sensitivity, that's what we call the orgasm line. It's actually Masters and Johnson's, the clinical sexologists from the last century. they distinguish the orgasm line. Above this level of sensitivity in the genitals, a person will have an orgasm. So what we added to that is if you get to that level of sensitivity and you're relaxed, you'll stay above that line and you'll have all those signs of orgasm that Alicia was talking about: involuntary contractions in the genitals, engorgement, release, etc., for really as long as you want to. So what you need is high sensitivity in the genitals above the orgasm line and relaxation. So, excuse me, it's a little bit like if you were filling a bathtub. Instead of sort of filling the bathtub with water and then the water level rises, then you're above a certain line of sensitivity, let's say, water line, and then you open the drain, you turn the faucet off, you open the drain, the water level goes down. Instead, you have the water rising and the drain open. The drain open is the orgasm, the release, and you have the sensitivity increasing. Okay. Through all the body practice and meditation and sensual practice. You're really good at adding chemistry and turn on a mile a minute, but you're not tensing up around it. So then the body you get past a certain very, very high level and the body just stays at that level. It's funny because tomorrow we have an extended orgasm course online.
Yes. We have courses about it because, most people they're like, oh, I can kind of get that. You sort of feel like, yeah, my body's capable of that much pleasure, but people aren't quite sure how to get there. Women especially, we work with a lot of women who come to us and they're like, I've never really had an orgasm, or I'm not sure if I've had one, or I can have them by myself, but it's hard with a partner, or like, I have orgasms, I want more. And, from wherever you are, you can learn how to have extended orgasm.
Right. Yeah. So why is this such new information, the extended orgasm? You'd think we have so many years of exploring our bodies and learning about our bodies and minds and how our psychology works with our bodies. Why does it seem like this, padlocked thing or something? Because it seems like a beautiful, wonderful thing that a lot more people should be able to explore and experience in their life. Is it just kind of like the Western model of society life? Why is this so? I guess why is it? It's strange to me that I'm just now learning about this. You think that there would be information floating around about this somehow.
You would think, right? Yeah. But people are very sexually repressed. I mean, on average, people in the East are more sexually repressed than they are in the West. I mean, sexual repression really is the norm. And you can look at it from a psychological viewpoint, conditioning in childhood and life and culture and all the rest of that. But it's probably better to take a sort of longer view, maybe a historical or evolutionary view. Sex is a big deal. Throughout most of human history, even prehistory, getting pregnant is a super big deal. It changes life completely. It's potentially dangerous, diseases, all kinds of stuff. So it's, the pill, condoms, this kind of thing. These are this little tiny little blip, in human evolution, like this little tiny fraction in like miles and miles of, history and time and like that. So, there's a lot of holding and gripping around sex. Even mammals, if you look at mammals, like, their sex is kind of like, they get kind of agitated about it and it's kind of a big deal and like that. So, we're just catching up with what's possible sexually and relaxing during sex. As a species, we're just kind of opening up to it. The cultures and the norms are just starting to kind of release and unfold. And all of that tension and fear is held in people's bodies. People are, kind of constrained and tight and afraid. And, it's a really big deal to open up sexually with somebody. There's a lot, you really, especially for extended orgasm, you have to open your heart and your mind and your body and like It's kind of like, taking acid. It's going to be a really good trip or it's going to be really difficult, but once you get the hang of it, that's why we work very gradually with people. We usually have people start with just, with their partner, or if they're single, with themselves, but let's say with a partner, one person will just put their hand on the partner's heart and partner's abdomen. We call it deep touch. Maybe do a few weeks of just deep touch. Or in the pleasure course, even couples will have them practice individually masturbating, kind of learning about this kind of thing, so that the entry is very, very gradual, so that their psychology and their mind can keep up with the intensity, and so they don't basically blow out or go unconscious.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I love that you guys are teaching about this, because I feel like it's a, it's a corner of conversation that, I think our culture does have, a bit of shame and repression around sexual, sex, intimacy, a lot of our romantic sides. So I think that it's great that you guys are doing this. When you were talking about, Erwan, when you're talking about, the release, like the tightening that we have interiorly, the tightening that we have of our muscles and the tension that we hold, that was when I first started doing yoga and meditation, just a few years ago. That was something that I learned. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it, but I'm holding tension in areas that I never knew. And you do guided meditations. You'll be sitting there for a few minutes following your breath, and they'll inquire you to let go of the holding you're doing around your eyes, let go of the holding you're doing around your arms, that sort of thing. So I imagine that when it comes to the extended orgasm, it's probably a lot of that. Like you're kind of letting go of things that you didn't realize you were holding internally. Does that sound all right?
Yeah.
Yes, especially your mind.
Especially your mind, yeah.
Yeah, and to let go in a somatic way. The work we do with people is very somatic. For example, we might have people breathe into their pelvis. Breathe into their pelvis, feel it, notice that tension they're probably holding, gradually release it, actually practice some exercises like a Kegel, pulling the genitals in, or a Mula Bandha, like a yogic lock in the pelvis, but then also pushing out. You can read all those old texts, the Taoist texts and the yogic texts. None of them actually even talk about pushing out. Right? They all talk about the Mula Bandha kind of pulling in, but pushing out is actually more important because there's already so much tension there. So we have people practice those kind of exercises, breathe the energy up the spine, down the front. That's a classic Taoist exercise, breathing up the spine, down the front, or a Kundalini exercise, up the spine, right? And in our edition is we really bring it into everyday life and relationship and orgasm, and emphasize the pushing out and how do you keep the genitals in that kind of nice, relaxed, juicy place. It accentuates spiritual life and chemistry and romantic life. And, it just kind of makes us happier because there's not a missing link in the chain of our body and mind. When there's a missing link in that chain, there's less zing, jing, enthusiasm, vibrancy, energy, fun, turn on. It's just less of a good time. So, sometimes I don't say it this way anymore, but I used to say, could people take it the wrong way? But we're kind of a school about learning how to party, But people nowadays think that means taking a bunch of drugs. That's not really our thing.
Yeah. No, I resonate with that. I like that. I like that phrasing. I think that still works. Well, so we are getting up here in time, you two. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming on here and allowing me to poke and prod and ask the questions. So you guys have some workshops who you can find. We can find you on YouTube. You do have an online website. Where else can we find you? Where else, if anybody wants to dive more into this, where do they go?
Yeah. So the best way to do that, actually, if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, cool. I want to know what extended orgasm is, or, oh, I want to get into that relationship or whatever. If something just really touched you, I'm offering love life consultations, and you can set one up with me by texting Erwan Davon Teachings. I'll give you the phone number. It's 415-308-9580. It's 415-308-9580. And you just tell me your name and that you heard about us here on the podcast and that you want to set up a consultation, and then we'll schedule it from there. And in the consultation, you can tell me whatever you want to tell me about your goals, your challenges, your desires, and your love life and your sex life. And we'll look and see which of our programs would be the best fit. We have private coaching, and we have classes like weekly, year-long classes and weekend intensives and all sorts of fun stuff.
Wonderful. Beautiful. Okay, well, let's do one last question, and then we'll end it here. For each of you could answer individually. What does the world need more of right now?
Consciousness.
Yeah.
Love it. Awareness, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, besides when I said love, sweet love in my head with the song, like relaxation and enjoyment.
Perfect. Perfect answers. I really appreciate it, you two. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys doing this work. You know, like I said, to me anyway, there's not a ton of people that I know of that are doing these things, and I think we should be invited more to explore our own physiology, psychology, how it all relates. The wonderful experiences we're all able to have as humans on this planet. So. Thanks again so much, you guys. I will be in touch via email. Listeners, take care of yourselves. Drink some water. Check out these two. Send some text to Alicia if you are interested in exploring more. Thanks again. Take care, guys.
Conversations with ourselves.
Knowledge is power.